Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to use a wet form mold, and I'm going to make a molded ammo pouch out of this piece of leather. And this leather is probably about 8 or 9 ounce veg tan. So come on in and let's get started. All right, so I've got several clamps here that I'm going to use. I've got my veg tan leather. I have a handmade mold that I made here. I want this to be a clip-on type ammo pouch. So I'm going to use one of these metal quick release type clips. That'll go on your belt or your pants. So I'll set those aside. We're going to use that later. I've got a board here that I'm going to use as a backer to set my mold on. And this is a mold that I had made. It's just out of lightweight pine. And I made this specifically for an iPhone case or holder that I made for someone. But you can make it different heights or what. So you can customize a lot of stuff just using this one mold. You can see I put it on the sander and I rounded the edges of it so that my leather edges will be rounded. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of this leather, and it doesn't have to be that big because I'm not making it the full length. I'm only making it about half of the height of this, so it's not going to be this tall. It's only going to be about half of that height. So it's for smaller caliber ammo. So I'm going to have to figure out exactly where I want to cut this at, how I want to cut it. In order to make sure that I have enough material here. So I think I'm going to cut it right there. That way I should have plenty of material lengthwise. Let's set this piece aside because we'll need that for the back. And I'll show you that in this process also. So let's go ahead and cut this piece off. And again, it doesn't have to be super precise. We're going to clean all that up afterwards. But I do want it, you do want this to fold down and under the outside piece of your mold. And I just did it like this so that it had a handle on it. You don't have to do that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is let's go ahead and straighten this up just a little bit up here at the top with all this mess. And again, this can all be straightened up afterwards too. Let's look and see what we have here. going to be about the right height. By the time we fold that over into that mold and roll it around and still have an edge to do stitching on, that's going to leave from my thumb up the height of my pouch. So that's going to be 3 inches. That should be plenty deep enough. So the next step that I need to do is actually, before I do, I'm going to go ahead and square this thing up good. I don't have to right now, but I might as well do it now and get that part over with. So let's go ahead and put this on my grid, on my mat. And we'll square that up on that top edge right there. And then the rest of it we can trim out after the fact. So let's go ahead, and the next thing I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to immerse it in water and get it good and soaked so it'll take shape. So I'll be right back. Alright, I immersed this in some pretty warm water just for a few seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and it really made it pliable. So I'm going to take my backer board here set the inside of my mold on top of that. And then I want to measure approximately 3 inches from the top of my leather down to where my mold starts to bend. And then I can measure up, that's 4. I want it to be fairly straight, square. Then I can take the outside of my mold, keeping that as flat as possible, and then I just rock it. Just keep rocking that down on there. You gotta remember that that leather is still pretty pliable. Now, once I get that down, I can go ahead and slide this over and I can go ahead and put one of my clamps on. Put that on where it's nice and snug. I'll do the same to the other side. see it pulling that down. Pulls this outside down to the mold. I'll snug that one down. Then I'll go to the back side here. Snug it down. Now I'm looking in the crevice, the crack there between the two pieces, making sure I've got nice flat contact so that I get that nice mold effect for that rounded edge right there. And then I'll let this sit. Make sure that my clamps are good and tight. And I'll let this sit for a good at least 2, maybe 3 hours. I'll let that sit and start drying out. I do have a small fan over on this end of my workbench, probably about 6 feet away, so I don't have any direct air on it. But I've got just a little bit of circulation going on around my workbench here so that I can get some air movement. And that's all it is. I'm not blowing direct air on it trying to speed dry it or anything. So I'll let that set and let that mold up to its shape. And then once that time has went by, then I'll bring you back and we'll move on with the project. Alright, so it's been about 3.5 hours, and you can see by looking at the leather, it's back to its normal color. Let's go ahead and pop these clamps off, and you can see immediately the shape that it took. There's the inside. So it molded it really nice. And I've done this again for a cell phone case a couple of times before. It keeps its shape. So now what I need to do is I need to get my outside trimmed down. So I'm going to take my stylus and my ruler, and I'm just going to go right from the edge and mark it from the edge. I'm going to start with a 1/4 inch. Remember, this is one of those measure twice, cut once type things that you can always take more off if you need to, but you can't put any back on. So there's my scored line, and I'll turn it over. Do the other side. Same way. There's that scored line. And then I'll do the bottom. There's the scored line across the bottom. Then I'll just go ahead and cut it. Then we'll do the corners. Again, I score those lines to make sure that's exactly what I want. And then it also helps for my knife to travel right on that score, because I'm not using super heavy pressure on my knife, and it'll follow right in that scored line. Makes it very easy to cut. I don't have to give it a ton of pressure. And then now I can do the corners. I want to round those off. So what are we going to use? It's got to be something fairly small. Looking at my rounded corner or rounded punches. Different sizes. And I'm not going to punch it. I'm just going to push down on it a little bit, give it a little score. Then as I cut that, I can kind of shape that corner. You can see there's the squared corner, and now there's my rounded corner. Turn it. And there's the other one. So there's the top piece molded, and ready to go. That would be the actual piece that you open the top piece and the cartridges would go in here. Now, to do the back, or the piece is going to fold over, I need to make sure I have plenty, which I do. On the same exact piece I cut this out of, I have plenty of this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and trim off these little flaps that are hanging out here. I don't need all that causing me any issues or problems. Get that out of the way. Then I'm going to do the same thing with it that I did with this. I'm going to get it good and wet, and then I'm going to put my granite piece that I do all my stamping on, and I'm going to lay that on there, and I'm going to let that flatten out, because that's going to be our backing piece, or our second piece. It's going to go like so, and then fold over and be our closure flap. So let me do that, and I'll show you how I'm going to flatten this out, and then I'll be back. Alright, so I've have this piece molded, trimmed, cut. Got this piece wet. You can see how it's not flat, how it's got some waves and curves in it. I'll take my, let me get this out of the way, harm's way here. I'll take my piece of heavy marble or granite and set it on top of that, and that'll give us a nice flat piece of leather to work with for our other backing piece here that'll end up being our flap and our closure. So we'll let that sit overnight, and then we'll go ahead and continue this project. Alright, so this is the first of probably two. It'll be a 2-video project. But we've got the first piece done, molded. We've got the second piece laying underneath our heavy granite top that we do all of our stamping on. So that's enough weight to keep that nice and flat. We'll let that dry overnight, and we'll get back to that so we can go ahead and cut out the second piece, and then we'll start putting some hardware and stitching that together. So don't forget, we're going to use the quick release belt clamp on that, so you want to come back and check out the second video. I'd appreciate it. Appreciate you coming along for this one. And you can mold that leather into about any shape you want. So you just have to come up with the idea and then make you a mold of some type. So appreciate you coming along. Appreciate you watching. And as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.